Hello, and welcome to I Hate Talking, a podcast about talking, including etymology, frustrating topics, current events, and other random subjects. I'm Adam.
And I'm Steph. We are married, and we invite you into these discussions with us as we talk about the good and the bad of talking.
We hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome to episode 17 of I Hate Talking.
Here to talk about my most hated topic.
And what is your most hated topic?
Money.
Money. So part 3 of our little unplanned money miniseries, where we started out with inflation and money dysmorphia, then moved into, in our most recent episode, some of the strategies around budgeting and making sure that we are managing our social media inputs appropriately, as well as making sure that perhaps sharing some resources that are out there with others. And now we are on to part 3. But before we do that, we always have a word or phrase of the episode. And what is our word or phrase of the episode in this episode?
Naivety. I said it so well the first time. No. Naivety.
Nativity?
No, not like Christmas. Not baby Jesus. Oh, no. Now you're in my head.
So that would be the word naive. Naivety.
Naivety.
Now I can't even say it properly.
See?
So what does the word naivety mean?
You have the dictionary in front, don't you? Am I looking at... Oh, no.
Well, I don't even know how to spell it.
We're laughing because I said the word, and Adam was very impressed that I said it so clearly, because I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that I struggle to speak clearly sometimes, and that's a hard word to say. And now we're tripped up and neither of us can say it right.
Indeed. So, naivety. I can't say it properly either. Naivety.
Naivety.
So, that particular word is from being naive, but it is the actual noun of having the lack of experience, wisdom, or judgment. So this actually is from the French for naivete, and comes from basically that status or state of being naive. Again, that apparent or actual lack of experience or sophistication.
Sounds good.
So now you no longer need be naive on the definition of naivety.
Not to be mistaken with nativity.
Exactly. So we are going to continue, as we said, on this discussion on money, and again, move into perhaps some things that have either worked or not worked in our own personal experience with regards to strategies around budgeting and money management, and just dealing with economic downturns or upturns when we find that we are within those things. And for this particular topic, we're going to continue with cost tracking.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things that's most helpful for me. I go through phases. Right now, I'm in one of those phases where I'm trying to track all the money I'm spending. Makes me really think twice about making a purchase because I have to go write down that number on my little spreadsheet. And it's also been interesting. I separate up by weeks now, and like what I buy at Target versus Kroger or Chick-fil-A and that sort of thing. I have so I can see how often I patron all those places. 1 week, I was $1 off. Now I just round up. I don't do cents. But with each purchase, I just round to the nearest dollar higher. and I was only $1 off 2 weeks in a row. So I thought that was pretty good that I'm sticking, at least for those 2 weeks, pretty consistent on my purchases.
That is very good. And when we're doing our budgets, again, maybe perhaps a call back to our last episode in budgets, but uh, for our budget, we balance that down to the penny.
You do.
I do. And I think that is only because my mom was an accountant and drilled that into me. So shout out to my mom for the accuracy down to the dollars and cents. So for my particular cost tracking, I also do something similar, but I will actually get an alert for every expense on any sort of electronic transaction that happens for any of our accounts.
Years ago, I was with a friend and we went through the McDonald's drive through to get a soda. And so you text and you were like, enjoying your soda? And she was so impressed that you knew what I was doing, or so shocked, or maybe a little freaked out that you were tracking me so much. But I was like, no, he gets notifications on his phone. He knows that if I spent $1.10 at McDonald's, it's a soda I bought.
Exactly. So those are things that typically most financial institutions with either a credit card or a debit card will allow you to set alerts that can also have the benefit of notifying you of any potentially fraudulent expenditures. So if your credit card happens to fall into wrong hands and they start spending money, that you'll see these alerts and be able to put a stop to that. But it also, I think, again, going back to maybe perhaps one of the Ramsey solutions in terms of the envelopes and the actual physical money, these alerts do make it a little bit more tactile in terms of what you're actually spending, that you'll have a record of it, that you'll get the alert, that it's not just you scan all the groceries at the checkout and swipe the card and move on with your life, but that there is a small amount of additional attention brought to your mind in terms of your expenditure for, in our case, any expense, 1 penny or more.
I think that's super practical to have, because also, what if somebody steals our card? Like, you can get your fraud checked quickly if we know that we aren't buying anything, or maybe something was ran twice on accident. You can notice that quicker than waiting for your statement. Also, one year you challenged me. It wasn't for credit cards or bank cards. That's what we're talking about right now, is the practical use for that. But one December, I got cash and I did not use my card. Now, you paid our stuff. You paid our water bill and stuff like that using cards. But for food, gas, any extra purchases, I had to use cash, and it was very difficult to budget because I knew I needed this money to last. It was also shocking when I was buying with people how many employees would be shocked they had cash and were struggling themselves to count out change. So that's so quick just to swipe, and now you just tap. You don't even have to really pull out your card.
Yeah, and in today's day and age, you don't even have to go to the store. You can just buy it online,
Oh,
process the thing electronically, and have it delivered right to you.
okay, but also, can that also, you can tell me if you disagree. That I feel like also helps me with my budget. Um, we use Kroger. Sounds bougie, but we use Kroger delivery now for our groceries. But it is so nice because you get the gas points, and so to fill up my minivan, it's a lot cheaper. But when I'm sitting down, I can meal plan. I can see what's on sale and plan what we have and very strategically buy stuff, versus if I'm at the store and impulse buy, like, oh, that's on sale, or oh, that looks delicious. This way, I feel like I stick easier with the budget when I'm looking in my cart on my phone versus just in my cart physically shopping. I think I save more money and stick with the budget when I'm shopping from home versus if I'm in the store impulse buying.
Exactly. And also within those apps, you already mentioned that you're getting some points and can identify perhaps more quickly what you are buying that's on sale at one store versus the other, rather than looking at the particular quote unquote circular, as it used to be called, for different grocery store advertisements. And as well, you also have a history of your purchases that you could see what you are frequently purchasing and perhaps what is being consumed most often, and potentially perhaps finding a cheaper substitute for those items if it's a highly expensive item, or seeing how the costs have changed over time, which is actually an interesting anecdote that relates to some of our discussion on inflation. There was actually a Redditor that went back and looked at their Walmart purchasing history, and they had a store purchase from January of 2020 for 30 items, and that cost them $70.29. And they did a little experiment where they added those same exact 30 items to their store for, this was back in June of 2024, so about 4.5 years later. That order for the exact same 30 items, supposedly, because we know that quality also has decreased to some degree, but the dollar amount for those same 30 items was $165.42, which represents a 135% increase in the cost of goods over those 4.5 years.
Wow, that's insane. But also, I guess it shows that my thinking is developing along with purchasing. Like I'm used to these prices because when you said that, I was like, wait, is that tax? The $70, is that tax included or not? Because 30 items for $70, that's just a little over $2 an item. What is he buying? That's all these items that are just $2 each.
So they had on the screenshot that they shared a granola bar, single serve, 2 boxes of cereals, a bag of tortilla chips, and some popcorn. So that's the only thing that is visible in the screenshot. So perhaps some items that are maybe a dollar or two, all the way up to maybe a few dollars, and then maybe some larger items.
Okay, and maybe like apples. Are they counting apples individual? Because apples now are over $1 a piece usually.
Yes, this would be in whatever grouping the Walmart app does it. I think these would be probably line items, the actual individual SKU, but hard to say. But yes, nonetheless, 30 items, $70. Those same 30 items up to $165.
But obviously, 4 years later, his salary, like we were talking about before with inflation, it is not, unless he is some big mogul for whatever, his salary hasn't increased that much.
Highly unlikely. And I think the normal experience is that during those COVID times, people were either getting very minute increases or no increases at all, or even some people being furloughed or laid off, and that there's no way that they had a 135% wage increase over those 4.5 years. It was probably more somewhere in the neighborhood of, I would guess, 7 to 8% over that 4.5 year period.
Okay, so call back to our word of the day. But like, I just feel like I'm super naive. What did we do with all that money 4 years ago? Or are we as a society just in debt more than we were 4 years ago?
So, as a nation, and some of the things that we talked about as well in terms of the comparative nature of how we're doing financially being appropriate or not appropriate. But one thing that we can determine is that this is a period of time that the American citizen has the most amount of debt that they have ever had within our lifetime.
So not because boomers, right? Like baby boomers, their generation had quite a bit of debt. So, and then they all, not all, many of them got out of it and reworked their finances. So since that generation, so basically since baby boomers were our age, was that the last time that was seen like this? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just indicating that for our lifetime, so the last 30 to 40 years, that this is the highest per capita debt load that has existed in.
Okay, so you can't blame it on just credit cards because that's what I think the generation or so or two before us got into trouble is with the creation of credit cards.
Yes, and that is the theory on a number of people that I follow, that this credit card debt remains at record levels because Americans are relying on those credit cards due to inflation. So, to answer your question in terms of what we're doing with the money that was left over from purchasing the 30 items for $70, it was either going into savings or that is the money that we had. And now, perhaps in this theoretical scenario, we only have $80 to $90 to spend on those 30 items. So the remainder of the $75 to $85 is going onto a credit card to be dealt with later.
Wow. So in my scenario, I'm thinking, oh, well, in his scenario, he bought the granola bars. I said apples earlier, but he had a granola bar. So he's paying a ton of money for that granola bar if he's paying interest on it then.
Exactly. So the estimates say that about, on average, 9.8% of the household income goes to managing debt payments just for credit cards.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Like, is that including school debts or anything? Because there's some debts. I mean, unless you are come from a family that is able to help a lot financially, or you win the lottery or whatnot, debt is a big part of our society because you have a house. If you buy a house, if you buy a car, most people aren't able to save up for that stuff, at least very easily, to get it, to pay in cash or whatnot. So you do have debt as a society, culturally here, right?
Yes, I think so. I think, some of those things in terms of having debt on a physical asset like a home or a car are less of a liability, right? Because you have that physical asset against the asset, whereas revolving debt with like credit cards and things of that nature are less so. I think that, again, if you're responsible with it, you actually can benefit from it because there's a number of things that offer points or cash back or some of the things that we talked about last month with deferred payments, depending on when expenses and incomes are hitting in terms of time, and you actually have some time to value on that cash that you can make interest rate and actually make a little bit of interest versus paying the interest. But nonetheless, you have to be responsible with those things. And again, if you're in a point where you don't have a cushion and you're in debt, you don't really have any physical asset in order to liquidate to be able to overcome that particular debt.
Right. And I mean, there are ways you can use, again, like you said earlier, how you differ with Ramsey, since he's very against that, is there are ways you can use it for your benefits, like getting the points, getting cash back, all that sort of thing. But also, as a society, we need credit cards in a way, right? Because that's how you're going to build your credit score to buy a car or to buy a house.
That does have an input into your credit score with regards to how you're managing revolving debt through a credit card, as well as building up your credit history. And the most important thing on that is on-time payments of at least the minimum payment for anything, mortgage, a auto loan note, or your credit card. And that's one of the things that will be important, as well as your debt limit to income ratio being important in terms of how much debt you have versus how much income that you have. From my experience, those are, I think, two critical things that impact your credit score. It's interesting to note that if you do have a credit card and are paying off the full balance every time, that actually may not benefit your credit history that much. You actually need a little bit of balance to remain on there because then you're actually in debt, quote unquote, and that will have a more positive acceleration on a good credit score as long as you're, again, managing that debt to income ratio and making all your payments on time.
And then how do you find out? Is that based on is that just a general rule of thumb, or is that based on certain credit card companies? That's what they like to see.
That is typically based on the 3 credit score companies that do this as a living that go into that particular calculation.
Okay.
So all in all, right, the thing that we're getting at in terms of the concrete strategy for this particular episode is tracking every cost, balancing the budget, in our case down to the penny, and making sure that we understand where all our money is coming from, which is going to be, for most people, quite a bit easier in terms of having a job that is where you're getting your income, as well as more complex fashion where all your money is going with regards to reviewing credit card statements or getting credit card alerts and reviewing where all your debit card transactions are coming from and everything that is going out of your checking and savings account. And to that end, one of the things that I think is a legitimate thing to check on, although I think it has become somewhat of a overused trope, is looking at your monthly expenses as it relates to subscription services. So that is one thing that you can look at in terms of what you're paying for a TV subscription or a music subscription. Don't cancel Spotify so that you can continue to listen to us. But those are things that, again, are things that you can evaluate and determine if you are really getting the necessary benefit out of it for the cost, or where you could cut those costs, again, if you're dealing with the rise of the costs with things that you need in terms of food or basic necessities, that these are things that maybe you'll have to make the hard decision that you hit pause on or cancel outright for that time being so that you can manage your budget accordingly.
Yeah, it's so hard nowadays because, I like to watch The Office. So that's the Peacock. And so that's a certain amount. And then the kids like Netflix and Disney Plus and Apple TV. And again, I was saying, I feel like I keep going back to it's just a couple dollars. But then when you're adding all those up, it really can start taking a big chunk of the money away. And how often are we really watching so-and-so? Is it worth $5 an episode if we only watch 2 shows a month on it?
Exactly. All things that must be considered with regards to your expenses. And the other thing that we've touched on as well in our episode 2 episodes ago was not only the cost side, but also the income side. So anything else on the cost side before we talk on a few things related to the income side?
Yeah, well, just real quick on what you were saying about the subscriptions. I will own that I fall for this constantly, and it makes me so frustrated. But they'll have a sale 6 months for $2 or something. So I sign up, and then I do not cancel it before that subscription ends, and then you get charged. We do that with a couple of meal services. They'll send me a coupon. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I can't even pay this at the grocery store. And then I'll be really consistent about skipping meals for a while. Deliveries, they let you do that. But you have to go in and manually skip them. And then I'll miss one, and then we get a full price delivery. I forgot to skip that week, and it's so frustrating.
Yep, and I'll find out about it as soon as I see the charge on the credit card with that alert and know that you forgot to skip that one. And
And then that's how I know we have groceries coming.
it was when I text you and say, I see we got another
Yes.
every plate.
Yep.
Indeed. So, on the income side, like we talked about before, one of the most important things that is your particular asset is your own intrinsic ability, your health and ability to do a job and generate income. So, that is also something that you need to consider on how to protect and develop in terms of your own abilities to generate income, whether that be through career development or just healthy living so that you can continue to be a productive member within your job place and continue to receive a paycheck. Because again, when we are living paycheck to paycheck or are in a particular debt scenario, if we do have a particular accident or unhealthy thing that we encounter and are unable to generate income, that cushion does become so much more important. And there's even opportunities with particular insurances that if you are living a more dangerous lifestyle and doing sports or martial arts or things of that nature, that you can even buy accident insurance. And those are all costs and benefits that one must determine how they pursue or not pursue. But nonetheless, the bottom line, making sure that you protect your own health and ability in order to generate that income, as well as just develop skills that can make you more of an asset within the job place, which hopefully will lead to raises and promotions beyond the average.
Yeah, I like that. You can bring it back to 'cause money. I think one of the reasons I hate talking about money so much is that it just seems cold. It's this bottom line number. But just saying that, like, we're all people and we all have our intrinsic worth. And so, what can we do to help ourselves, help society, help our families? Like, right now, I do not make any income. I stay home and take care of the kids and the family and stuff. But you are so much more than just the person who brings a paycheck home so I can go buy stuff.
Indeed, and that brings us to our final point for this episode is when you are managing your costs and you are doing things to pursue additional income generation or at least stabilizing that, is what you can do with your potential excess money. We've mentioned some of the things around saving or investing, but one of the other critical things is donations, charity, and giving.
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
So when you do have those things and you have the ability to, again, recognize the intrinsic value of others, you can donate that money to causes as you see fit, as well as support your local community, your local church, or whatever particular nonprofit entities that you most subscribe to. Those are things that benefit the community as well as ensure that we have a healthy outlook on money and consumption and helping others.
Yeah, I love that. Because many times in our lives, we've had times where people have helped us. Having the joy to be able to help people is a real blessing. And if I can just share like a quick anecdote, that every time I get stressed about money, my dad was always really quick to remind me about, because you're talking about giving and the importance of it. My parents had an older a child before I was born who was very ill, and they couldn't pay their hospital bills. They wanted to, they were trying to, but they just physically did not have the money. Doctors and the nurses took up a fund for him, helped pay those bills. And still to this day, my dad talks about that all the time as how good people can be and how generous, that when they were at their saddest and their hardest part of their life, that hopefully they never have to do anything that hard again with this sick child who ultimately passed away. They didn't have the weight of paying all those bills for essentially the rest of their life on them. The doctors and nurses were so generous and really took one really difficult part away from them at their hardest part of their life.
Indeed. So we've talked about a number of concrete things that one can do to manage their expenses, budget accordingly, perhaps further income generation. But at the end of the day, these things in terms of helping others are critical to keep in the forefront of our mind in terms of what we can do with our wealth when we have it. And those are things that we want to encourage our listeners to consider as well. So, from your friends at I Hate Talking, until next time, remember, it is only through talking that we begin the journey to understanding.